When we talk about study all sources, do we deal with 2 sources, 3 sources, 4 sources, or even all of these sources? That is the important question. How many sources do you actually use? Welcome to Mr. Go channel. I'm Mr. Go and let's go! We are down to assertion and evaluation questions. So how do you answer study all sources question in social study? And this is what we are finding out today. In a question that requires you to answer it, you need to understand what is it first. What is an assertion/evaluation question? An assertion questions in the Cambridge Dictionary is a statement that you strongly believe that is true based on perhaps evidence or conviction. But in social study, what is an assertion question? It requires you to analyze all these sources and decide if these sources agree or disagree with the given statement. Usually, it is revolving around the issue. And after that, write a well-considered response to the question. When I say a response, it doesn't really mean a paragraph. It really means multiple paragraphs, but to show that you have considered all or perhaps a decent number of sources. So this is a 10-mark question, and your job is to score 10 upon 10. So what is the expectation? The expectation is to write about 2 to 5 paragraphs and nothing less than that. I mean, if you're going less than that, you're probably looking at a grade that fails. Ideally, multiple paragraphs, we are talking about multiple ideas, so 1 idea per paragraph. In terms of marks that are allocated to certain answers, and this is what we are called LOMs or level of required markings schemes, we are talking about one source which agrees or disagrees with the given statement. We are talking about 2 to 4 marks. Why is there a range? The range is for the examiner or your teacher to decide, this student has written this much. Is it considered well-considered response, or is there something lacking? If it's something lacking, I'll give you the lower of the band. And if it's something that is complete or perhaps comprehensive, I will allocate the maximum mark, which is 4. For one source that agrees and one source which disagrees, we'll be getting 5 marks. And that will be the score to beat because you need to pass, right? So next we talk about 6 marks, where we have 2 sources which agree and 1 source which disagree, or 1 source which agrees and 2 sources which disagree. And this is important because we're now dealing with 3 sources. When we go on to 4 sources, but they must have at least 2 agree and 2 disagree, we are dealing with 7 to 8 marks. Wait a minute, why is there a range again? The range is for the teacher to decide whether your responses are adequate or perhaps just barely making the mark. In that case, they'll probably get 7. But if your answers are well-supported answers and well-explained, well, we are talking about 8 marks, which is technically a distinction. And for the last bonus 2 marks to 10 marks, we need to choose one. Either we conduct a reliability check on one of the sources, come to a balanced conclusion after evaluating the sources, and rely on contextual knowledge to showcase why would you agree or disagree with the given statement. That you'll receive your bonus 2 marks. And we shall address the basic in this video. So this is my recommendation to get a distinction. You should at least aim for 2 sources which agree and 2 sources which disagree. That will be equivalent to 4 paragraphs. Of course, if you're a stronger candidate, you might want to attempt the bonus 2 marks using the last paragraph. Please take note that time is of the essence, which you need to manage as well if you wish to attempt the last paragraph. Let's talk about 1+1 ways. So the first way, which is the way that I recommend, is through multiple inference, which is the 2 plus 2. 2 sources agree and 2 sources disagree. Next, what is the one other way? We have talked about it. It's about reliability, contextual knowledge, and balanced conclusion. To test reliability, we can rely on bias, utility, and sufficiency. In other words, BUS. And you get your bonus 2 marks. So what are we dealing with when you talk about multiple inferences when we are talking about the source or sources? Wait a minute. Before we go on to the answers, we need to deal with this first. We need to analyze the question and the background information first, without which there's no point in dealing with the source. This is a typical paper that you see and is taken from the 2018 O-level paper. We are dealing with the last question, question E. So the question asks, globalization of culture has a positive effects. Using the sources in this case study, explain how far you would agree with this statement, and 10 marks are awarded for this question. When we talk about positive effect, we are dealing with benefits. That's the first thing I will underline and annotate above my question. Next, we'll talk about the different beneficiaries that is involved, because when we talk about benefits, it may not just benefit one party, we may actually benefit different parties. Next, usually when we see the question, how far we're dealing with both sides. So probably there'll be questions that agree, there'll be questions that disagree with a given statement. There'll be disadvantages as well. And when we deal with this question, we need to be attuned to the keywords in the question so that we can use it in our answer. In this case, the answers or the keyword is agree. Next, we have the topic which is about globalization of culture. So if any of the sources has certain segment which doesn't talk about globalization of culture, we might not want to quote it, we might not want to use it at all. And if you're confused about it, just keep it the source. Remember, we have 4 usually out of 6 sources that we can use. So this is our question analysis. So next we talk about the background information analysis. We deal with the question at the top. So in this case, this is called the issue, and it is usually
related to the statement.
Not exactly alike, but they are related. Next, we talk about how is it related to the topic. Globalization of culture has positive effects. So globalization affecting culture is really talking about globalization of culture, and there is
Positive effects.
so, and there's this part about how far, so we suspect that there might be negative effects as well. So next, we talk about background information. When we talk about the spread of global brands such as Disney and McDonald's, what we are actually dealing with are the examples of globalization. They are the companies that have spread worldwide. Next, these are the characteristics of globalization where we can buy the same product, eat the same type of food in Singapore. Is that a benefit? I'm not sure. For some, it might be considered as a benefit. For some, it might not. So
We'll wait and see.
increase international travel and the development of global communication networks. Some might think that these are the benefits of globalization, which is actually incorrect because they are the factors that lead to globalization. They are not the benefits of globalization. So I will skip this. Next, we have people are more exposed to other cultures. Definitely a benefit. Now we are talking about globalization affecting
Other cultures.
right? So they are more exposed than a few decades ago. And this will promote tolerance and understanding between different groups. So we might expect this in later sources, not now because we haven't analyzed any sources yet, but this could potentially be seen later. And next, we have cultural harmonization. This could be disadvantage number 1 or the negative effect. But we hold our horses first and we look at the different sources. So these are tentative ideas that we have in mind before we actually approach each source. So this will constitute our background information and we can use them as clues for our sources. Hence, this is absolutely important. We always read this first. So next, we go on to multiple inference, which is talking about source. When we talk about the content, here is my way of writing an answer to an evaluation question or an assertion question. So when you answer such question, we first must answer the question. Next, we come out our own inference. For example, if you were to say that globalization of culture has a
Positive effects.
that will be answering the question. In terms of inference, you must tell me why. Why is it positive? What exactly is the benefit? Next, we come out with the evidence.
You need to quote with a quotation mark.
Next, we come out with description from the text, cartoon or photograph, and we go on to explanation. We explain why is this evidence helping the inference? How does it support the inference? And last but not least, we need to link back to the inference itself. Usually, some teachers actually recommend to skip this. Personally, I won't recommend it because in case your inference there are some perhaps ill phrases, then I would suggest that this would be a good way to redeem yourself instead of losing the entire paragraph mark because nobody understands you. So all these will constitute one paragraph. And if we were to look at the initial of each part, we will get AIEEL, or in short AIEU. So AIEU is a framework that we'll use for our writing of our paragraphs. So later when we actually write our paragraphs, I'll show you how does it fit into my paragraph itself. Next, we have a choice of sources. So usually there are 5 to 6 sources. Example of source A to F, if you count, there are about 6 sources. So for this question, if you were to base this on my recommendation, I would perhaps recommend only 4 sources, because if you were to agree to disagree, you would probably get 8 marks. That would be sufficient to get A. But of course, some of you are ambitious, would like to attempt the full 10 marks, then I would suggest you go for the bonus marks as well. So there are 2 sources which agree the statement and 2 sources which disagree, and that will be 4 sources. Hence, you'll get about 8 marks. So which 4 sources do you choose? That's the important question. Well, the ones that you best understood.
That's the best answer I can give you. I mean, if you don't understand the sources,
how are you supposed to do well in the paper? There are some sources or perhaps some cartoons you don't understand. It would be in your best interest to skip them. So let's take a look. How I usually write my introduction will be one blanket statement that state the sources that agree that globalization of culture has positive effects using the exact same keyword, while source D disagree with it. So agree is the keyword you'll see here, and globalization of culture has positive effects are actually what I constitute answering the question because it is given in the statement. So I use the exact statement back in my answer. Of course, you can just
Replace it.
agree with the statement. That would totally be fine as well. Next, we have disagree, which is another keyword because you could of course write do not agree, but there will be 3 words. Disagree is shorter. I will go for disagree. Then we have sources C and E and D and F, which are the exact sources that I'll be using. This will be very precise and exactly what I need in my answer. So let's take a look at source C. So in source C, what we need is to deal with the source analysis. And when we talk about source analysis, we usually start from the provenance, right? And from an article published on a British news site, November 2014. So the British news site usually targets British audiences. It might not be Brits themselves, but British
Audiences who read the news site.
and we have a specific date, which is November 2004. Usually, this is connected to the background information where they state a certain date if it's talking about a particular event. But in this case, there is no particular event happening in the background information. This date probably is redundant and it has no specific context. So this entire section is irrelevant because we are dealing with the content, remember? So this whole thing should be eliminated. Instead, we deal with the content in the green rectangle. Let's start. Stroll into your local Starbucks and you will find yourself part of a cultural experiment on a scale never seen before on this planet. In less than half a century, the coffee chain has grown from a single outlet in Seattle to nearly 20,000 shops in around 60 countries. For the first time in history, your morning cappuccino is the same, no matter where you're sipping it in Tokyo, New York, Bangkok,
Or Buenos Aires.
in this case, there is this certain
Section which I wish to underline.
it means that you will drink the same drink everywhere. Is it a benefit per se? Just now we talked about drinking the same drink everywhere in the background information. I classify it as characteristics, not really a benefit per se. So in this case, I would not consider it a benefit. Some of you actually consider this a benefit, but I will ask myself this question: is there stronger evidence? If there is, I'll totally use it. So I'll read the other paragraph. So not really a benefit yet. The next paragraph starts with although. Although it is a
Contrast word. What does a contrast word do? It shows that there is a difference.
between 2 different ideas, and usually the 2 different ideas will have difference in significance or importance.
Next,
Many may complain about unstoppable and ever accelerating cultural homogenization, which is what I mentioned earlier, which I talked about is a disadvantage. But in this case, it's considered as a phenomenon, not a disadvantage yet, because they did not talk more about the details. It's brought on by the travel and the internet and social networking. It's probably a good thing.
I'll ignore this part because it's ambiguous.
And
Even if are contrast words.
so do take note of that. Even if it means that the loss of cultural diversity. So loss of cultural diversity is a disadvantage because you lose something that is precious to a certain culture. It increases our sense of togetherness,
File.
sense of a shared culture. So increased sense of togetherness is a benefit. So
There is a contrast or difference between the negative and positive effects.
in fact, breaking down cultural barriers, unfashionable as this sounds, is probably one of the few things that society can do to increase harmony. This can actually increase harmony, which is the benefit as well.
If you look at the entire source, there are both negative and positive effects. Which do we choose?
This is the answer. When you see contrast words such as however, yet, but, even if, usually the second half of the sentence is more important.
Let's take a look at an example.
However hard I try to like BTS new song, I still prefer
Blackpink's Pink Venom.
however is placed in front, so the second part is actually more important where we talk about Blackpink Pink Venom. So it's not about the liking of BTS new song, so that's not the focus and not as important as the second part of a sentence. If we were to look at the previous paragraph, the benefits are actually placed at the back, which is the second part of a sentence, hence they are more important. So this entire paragraph is talking about the benefits or the positive effects of globalization of culture. Sources C and E agree that globalization of culture has positive effects, and in this case, source C actually agrees, which shows the positive effects. Hence, I can say that I can infer from source C that globalization of culture is positive as unitable as they can identify with the culture. Source C states that it increases our sense of togetherness
Via the sense of shared culture.
and can increase harmony. As such, through a stronger shared identity, there will be fewer conflicts.
Thus, this speaks of the positive aspect of the globalization of culture.
In this case, these are the keywords that are highlighted in bold, and this this will be answering the question, the first part. Why is it a benefit? Because it unites people. That's my inference and it's not found in the passage, written in my own words. So hence it is a benefit. Increasing our sense of togetherness,
Fire
sense of shared culture, increase harmony,
are the evidences,
and
identify with the same culture through a strong shared identity.
and fewer conflicts are the explanation. And last but not least, we have the link. Positive aspect of globalization of culture, which is similar to the answering of question, but this is important to show the link back to the question that this is a positive aspect. And we have AIE.
One question that students often ask:
Mr. Go, what exactly is the examiner looking for? To answer your question, we need to look at the idea of holistic mark.
usually your teacher will read the entire answer to understand your response.
And your job is to write in such a structure that will make your answer easy to understand. And this will be an advantage compared to unstructured answers, which will still be read but may not be easily understood and hence higher chances of being misunderstood. So writing easy to understand structure such as AIEU will stand you in good stead. So this will let you award 3 to 4 marks. So we repeat the process for disagreement and that will probably get you to the passing mark. So to summarize, there are 1+1 ways to answer an evaluation or assertion question. The first way is through multiple inference. That's where we deal with the sources. Next, we deal with the bonus 2 marks, bias, sufficiency, utility, which we'll address in another video. We have come to the end of the video and thank you and have an awesome day.